Thank you very much indeed, inshallah. Just a couple of quick announcements. Of course, today is the day of Ashura. The Aman will be starting at 10:15, inshallah, but not here at the centre. I'm sure you're all aware of the address and getting the updates. So inshallah, we'll see you at our MCE centre at 10:15 for Aman. And of course, the Maqtal will be recited immediately after Salat al-Dhuhr in English as well as in Urdu, and then Niyaz will be said in the afternoon, inshallah. Tomorrow evening, the Shab-e-Ashur program will be taking place back here at this particular centre, inshallah. We're running slightly behind schedule, so we would not want to take any more of your time. So I'd like you to welcome our speaker, Al-Hajj Arif Chandu, with Allah salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Surah Al-Mubarak Al-Fatiha. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على الأشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين أبي القاسم محمد صلوات
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتاب المجيد والفرقان الحميد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. I begin in the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. All praises to Allah, Lord of the worlds, the sustainer of the universe. He who existed before bringing everything else into existence, and he who shall remain after everything else has perished. May his choicest blessings, mercy and salutations be upon the last of his messengers, the best of his creation, the mercy unto the world, Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And may he extend his blessings, mercy and salutations upon the pure and immaculate family of our beloved Prophet, his Ahlul Bayt, about which the Holy Prophet has said, my Ahlul Bayt are like the Ark of Noor. Whoever sets sail with them is indeed saved, and whoever remains behind shall perish. And on this sad and tragic night, the eve of Ashura, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to explicitly and specifically send his blessings, mercy and salutations upon the grandson of our beloved Prophet, his family and companions. About his grandson, the Holy Prophet has said, Innal Hussein misba'ul huda wa safinat al-najah. Hussein alayhi salam is the lantern of guidance and the ship of salvation.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. Respected elders, brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. There once lived a famous storyteller by the name of Aesop around the time of 600 BC. And his stories are famous until today for the wonderful and creative way in which he teaches morals and ethics to children and adults alike. And tonight I wanted to start by sharing one of his stories as an introduction to our subject this evening. And one of his stories which many of you may be familiar with, which I want to share, is entitled The Goose That Laid the Golden Egg. Many of our youth may have heard this story at school or at madrasa because it teaches important morals that are pertinent to both children and adults. And there once was a farmer, a poor farmer, who said in the story that he was faced with drought and famine and did not have enough food or money to buy food for his family. But all he had in his possession was one goose. It is said one day things became very desperate and he decided that he would slaughter that goose in order to give his family some food. When he went to slaughter the goose, he found under the goose that the goose had laid a golden egg. The farmer was delighted. He took the egg to the market, valued the egg. The gold merchants were delighted to see such an amazing piece of gold that they paid him good money for it. The next day when he visited the goose, he found the goose laid another egg. And the day after that, another egg. And the farmer became richer and richer and richer. The gold merchants in the market could not wait 24 hours for the goose to lay a golden egg. So they kept asking him, can you not get more eggs for us? The man became greedier, more impatient. So one day he decided that I can no longer wait for this goose to lay this golden egg. Then I will go and get hold of this goose, cut open his tummy and take out all the eggs from the goose's tummy. So of course after he slaughtered that goose, emptied his stomach, he found that there were no golden eggs anymore. The goose was now dead and was not able to give him golden eggs thereafter. Now Aesop in this story teaches us many morals, but one of them is about impatience, about not being able to wait for the good things that life has to offer. The other moral that he teaches is about greed, wanting too much too quickly. And if we think about it, each and every single one of us, and the reason why I started with this story is because we all have our golden eggs that we want in life. We all have those things that we desire in our life. Maybe the bigger car, the faster car, the bigger house, whatever it may be that we have in our mind, that our own golden eggs. And to what extent will we go in order to achieve that golden egg or that thing that we so desire or that success that we so much want in this world? If we think about it, Yazid wanted more than anything else power and wealth, that he was impatient, too greedy, to the extent that he was blind to the actions that he was committing in Karbala. That he was prepared to kill the very reason for the riches that Islam had brought. At that time, Islam had spread from Syria to Egypt, from Hijaz, all over the Middle East. It was because of Islam and the family of our Holy Prophet, which spread the religion of Islam, that Islam had become so successful, that the religion had gone so far. And yet, Yazid was prepared and could not see that he was killing the very reason and the very source of the blessing that Islam had. And if you think about it, Umar ibn Sa'd also was blind in Karbala. That he was prepared to start the battle, fire the first arrow. He kept repeating every time he was asked, how can I give up the governorship of Rai for others to take? That this impatience, this greed, this desire for his golden egg was so great that he was blind. He was blinded in Karbala. During these nights, we are examining the subject of success. Our lectures have been entitled The Eternal Principles of Success. And we have been examining the verses of Surah Al-Asr, the 103rd surah in the glorious Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala presents us only 3 verses, but in it lies the secret of eternal success. The Holy Prophet said, if we understood this surah alone, it would be sufficient for us to enter paradise. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Wal asr, innal insana lafi khusr. I swear by time, surely man is at a loss. And if we think about it, measured against time, time will destroy all material things that are around. Eventually, we too will be gone from this world. The things that we love will be disappear before our eyes. For time leaves no material thing intact. But then before we lose all hope, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. Time destroys all things except those things that are beyond the reach of time. Things that are eternal and immortal. And he mentions 4 provisions, 4 principles which he asks the believer to acquire. The first is Iman, which we have discussed. The second is Amal Saleh, the good deeds which we do in this world are not lost, are not destroyed by time. The third, which we discussed yesterday, is Haqq, or the truth, which does not expire, which is eternal, which survives the destruction of time. And then he mentions the last and the 4th provision, وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ, and those who enjoin upon each other patience. Patience is that virtue by which all these 3 other virtues mentioned in the surah are acquired. Without patience, we cannot have Iman. Without patience, we cannot do Amal and be obedient to the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Without patience, it is difficult to fight for truth, to establish the truth, to remain on the path of truth. Patience is that virtue by which all these other virtues are acquired. And so, inshallah, tonight, I want to end this series. This is the last in our series of lectures tonight, in which we are discussing these principles of success. And I hope that I've been able to convey the message, inshallah, and that whatever little effort that is made is accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tonight, I want to discuss patience from the following perspectives. Firstly, what is patience? How do we define patience in Islam? Secondly, why do we need patience? Thirdly, how do we go about acquiring patience? Fourthly, we'll ask what is impatience and how does it harm us? And lastly, how does patience help us achieve this eternal success that we so desire? Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
There are so many definitions that are out there for patience. But the one that appealed to me the most was that patience being defined as the resistance that mankind shows on the path of perfection in search of success. It is the resistance that mankind shows on this path of perfection and success. And a good way to understand this is that just as an athlete, when he's competing and running in a marathon, he needs stamina in order to complete that marathon, then the stamina of the believer, the stamina of the inner heart and the soul is nothing but patience. The Holy Prophet and our Imams have described this patience as the single most important ingredient in the success of spreading Islam and establishing the faith. It is what allows the believers to go through all the trials and the difficulties and the hardships that are presented to us in this world. It is the way by which all of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala religions have survived. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions sabr, the Arabic word for patience, more than 70 times in the glorious Quran. And patience is the common virtue in which all the inhabitants of paradise will share. That all of them will be there because within them they had inculcated this virtue of sabr or patience. And if we think about it, some people go through life thinking that life is a sprint. They want to get everything very fast, very quickly, get to the end so quickly. And yet, most of us will know that life is not a sprint, it is a marathon. But more than a marathon, you see, a marathon is 26 miles, about 42 kilometers long. And maybe some of us have ran a marathon or participated in a marathon and will know that it's not easy to complete. The best athletes complete it maybe in just over 2 hours. Most human beings, most other casual runners will take 8 or 10 hours to complete. Very difficult indeed. And yet, this life is a marathon which takes many years to complete. Takes us through thousands of miles. A marathon in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put within it an obstacle course with so many different types of trials and tribulations and tests that the believer will face. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the glorious Quran, وَلَا نَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. We shall test you with something of fear and hunger and loss of wealth and loss of life. Give glad tidings to the patient ones. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that in this life there will be so much trial and tribulation for the believer. And give glad tidings to the patient ones, because it's only if we have inculcated with ourselves this virtue of patience that we can successfully navigate our way through this world and successfully achieve paradise and the success that we so desire. So how do we acquire this patience? This virtue that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says is so important for the believer to acquire. If you think about it, if patience is like stamina, then as we know, stamina is acquired through endurance activities. Those who go to the gym will know that when we want to bring strength or muscle, we lift weights. We push weights in order to build strength. But for stamina, we do cardiovascular activities. We run, we swim, we jog, we climb, we do those endurance activities in order to build our stamina. And likewise, when it comes to patience, the stamina of the soul, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made those acts of obedience of His which train us in endurance. See, if we think about it, when children are young, when we look at our children, we find that they have very little patience, if no patience at all. They want instant gratification. They can't wait for things. But as they grow older, as parents, we train them and teach them to be patient. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, likewise for the believer, the number one endurance act that He has made for the believer, the act of obedience, is nothing other than fasting. For fasting is the best act of endurance that the believer has. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Fasting is that act of worship, that act of obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is there to build our endurance and our patience. And that is why when children are young, we teach them first to fast, quarter fast. And then we ask them to try the half fast. And then eventually when they are older and they are baligh, then they complete the full fast. And if we think about it, the month of Ramadan can be likened to the gymnasium of the soul. It is the gymnasium of the soul. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the month of Ramadan is preparing our nafs, our soul, in order to develop patience, to be prepared for the trials and tribulations of this world. Muharram prepares us mentally for the difficulties that we may face. When we remember the tragedy of Karbala, the hardship that befell Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, his family and companions, it prepares us and alerts us to the trials and tribulations that we may face in this world. When we wake up for Fajr Salah in the cold winter nights, or early in the morning in the summer months, when Fajr is very early in the morning, this requires great patience and builds patience within us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us lots of acts of obedience through which He has helped us to acquire and build the patience that we so require. But sometimes as human beings, when we think about patience, we think that patience is only something that we need to show when we face with trials and tribulations. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, and the Prophet shows us, that there are three types of patience that we require as believers in this world. The first is when we face trials and tribulations, and this is nothing less than a test of our iman or our faith. But then there is a level of patience that is greater than this, and that is a level of patience when it comes to the acts of obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When it comes to being obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, great patience is required. For this is how iman or faith is acquired. And then there is a level of patience which is even greater than this, which our Prophet describes. And he says this is the patience which we show when we are faced with temptation of sin or disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's commands. When we show patience in the face of disobedience, then this indeed is the highest form of patience that we can display as believers. And if you think about it, the verses of Surah Al-Asr, the principles or the virtues or the provisions that Allah describes in this surah, that of Iman, that of Amal Salih, obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that of Haqq or truth or safeguarding ourselves from disobedience, these are all virtues that can be acquired through patience with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tells us we need to display patience in order to acquire. You see, if we think about it, the very first virtue or the very first type of patience that we need to show against trials and tribulations, this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we show patience against trials and tribulations, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is testing our iman or our faith. Prophet Ayyub was that prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which Allah had blessed with many virtues, many blessings. And Shaitan would say to Allah, he is thankful and grateful to you only because you have blessed him so much. If you remove these blessings, you will be able to see how thankful he is to you. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala one by one took away Nabi Ayyub's wealth. He took away his children. He took away his wife, he took away his health. And each time Nabi Ayyub was thankful and grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests us with trials and tribulations, He wants to see how patient we are. Or do these trials and tribulations bring us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Or do they take us further away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? It's a test of our iman. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He tests us with trials and tribulations, He doesn't leave us alone also. In the glorious Quran, He presents us a verse where He says, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu sta'inu bis-sabri was-salah, inna Allaha ma'as-sabirin. Oh, you who believe, acquire patience and pray to Allah and seek my help through patience and prayer. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with the patient ones. Inna Allaha ma'as-sabirin. You see, in this world, if we think of the non-believers, when they are faced with trials and tribulations, what happens? What do? They go to the pub. They think that they can go to the pub, consume alcohol, and that will help them forget about the trials and tribulations that they are facing in this world. That they can drink away their problems. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the believer that seek my help through patience and prayer. And then He says, Inna Allaha ma'as-sabirin. Indeed, Allah is with those who are patient. Sometimes when we go through trials and tribulations, we feel that we are all alone, that we are going through this difficulty and this hardship all alone. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the believer, don't worry, I am with you. I am there with you. And if we think about it, on the plains of Karbala, Imam al-Hussein, when he went through so many trials and tribulations, and then he said, oh Allah, I am able to withstand all these trials because I know that you are a witness and that you are with me whilst I am going through this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us this powerful verse that He tells the believer that I may be testing you. You may be going through these trials and tribulations, but inna Allaha ma'as-sabirin. Do not worry, for I am with you. I am there for you. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And if we think about it, the barakah, one of the blessings of this tragedy of Karbala is that when we go through trials and tribulations, when we have lost a loved one, someone dear to us, and we remember the tragedy of Karbala and the suffering of Abu Abdullah Hussein alayhi salam, then our own pain, our own grief disappears away as we think about the grief of the master of martyrs. This is a blessing from the tragedy of Karbala that we as believers have when we face with our own trials and tribulations. But there is a level of patience which is even greater than this, that the Prophet said that has even greater reward in the eyes of Allah. And that is the patience that we show when we have to be obedient to the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because sometimes being obedient to the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is indeed very difficult. Those who have been for Hajj know how difficult Hajj is, how much patience is required in the performance of Hajj, or fasting in the long summer months when iftar is 9 p.m. and we have to go through that, how much patience is required for fasting or waking up for salah. You see, even in the act of salah itself, patience is required in the acts of obedience. Because you see in the verse which I just quoted, where Allah says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sta'inu bis-sabri was-salah, inna Allaha ma'as-sabirin. Oh, you who believe, seek my help through patience and prayer. Allah is with those who are patient. Notice that Allah puts patience before prayer. Salah is a way in which Allah tells us that we can seek His help, no doubt. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts patience before prayer. And if we think about it, when we all go towards salah to pray, how many whispers come into our mind? The thought will come, shaitan will whisper into our ears. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't need your prayer. There is no need to pray. Why are you praying? And we have to show great patience in order to not succumb to this whisper of shaitan. But it doesn't stop there. He continues. He says to us, don't worry. There is plenty of time before Fajr Salah is Qaza. Carry on sleeping. In the hope that He makes us, of course, miss our Salah, make it Qaza. But we have to show great patience and steadfastness in order to overcome the whisper of shaitan. Grow patience. And then He will tell us, the second half of the match is about to start. The commercial break is nearly over. The 2 minutes that we think in between a program that we can finish our prayers. Pray quickly, because the match is about to begin, in the hope that we make a mistake in our salah or forget one rak'ah. But we have to show great patience to even overcome this whisper. And then sometimes, after we have overcome all of this, He will whisper to us. He'll say, MashaAllah, what a great prayer you have prayed. What a great act you have performed, that you have overcome all of this. He will whisper, prolong your salah now. People are watching you. Or when I was young and your mother would come and look at you and watch you pray, they would say, prolong your salah, because your parents are watching you, in the hope that He will put some pride within our hearts about the prayer that we are performing. In this one act of salah, shaitan approaches us from many different ways. And it is only through this patience, this steadfastness, that we are able to protect our salah and prayer. That is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that in all obligatory acts of mine, that is patience that helps me, that helps you perform and accomplish these acts. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And the highest level of patience the Prophet has said that we can acquire, that we can demonstrate, that we can manifest as believers is patience when we are faced with the temptation of sin or disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that when we show patience in the face of disobedience, that this has the greatest reward. Because shaitan wants nothing more than to rob us from the iman that we have acquired within our inner hearts. And the Prophet said that sin burns away iman, just like fire can burn away woods. You see, it takes only one match to burn down an entire forest, as we have seen in the news. How many hectares and acres are burning around the world, in the Amazon, in Europe, started by one cigarette that has been thrown on the ground, or one barbecue that has not been put out. Shaitan wants to just light one fire within our inner heart to burn all the iman that we have acquired in this world. Patience is described as glue that helps iman stay within us, to make it stick within our inner hearts while shaitan is trying to take it out. Or it has been described as the fire extinguisher, or the bucket of water that we throw and we use to extinguish the fire that shaitan is trying to start within our inner hearts. That hoping that one sin, that one act of temptation might lead to burning and taking away all the iman that we have acquired in this world. Because patience is that glue, that virtue that ensures that all the deeds, all the faith that we acquire, all that truth that we try hard so much to portray and to acquire in this particular world remains within our inner hearts. And if we think about it, this world today sells us the opposite virtue of patience. Today, if we look at the world today, it is selling us impatience. It is pushing us the virtue of impatience. Buy now, pay later. Enjoy now, worry later. We're living in the age of next day delivery, express delivery, fast food, priority passes and express check and all these other things that are sold to us in order to tell us that you no longer need to be patient and wait for things. You can have everything at the click of your fingers. And if we're not careful, my brothers and sisters, I want to say a few words about this, because this very impatience that the world sells us risks of robbing all our iman from us. You see, the technology that we have today, the science and the medicine that we have today is a ni'mah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if we put reliance on technology alone above Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then the patience and the iman that we are so looking to acquire and have acquired can go very easily from within our hearts. And if you think about it, and I want to share with you some examples today with so much technology. Technology has made our lives very easy, but studies have shown that despite the fact that we have so many comforts, so much technology, that life has become so easy, we spend less time in ibadah than our grandparents used to spend 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago, when technology was less advanced, when they had to wash the dishes themselves, wash the clothes themselves. Today we are blessed that we have dishwashers and washing machines, which saves us so much time. And yet ibadah was more prevalent in those days than it is today. The elders would tell us that mashallah, today the youth have so much knowledge, but very little patience. And very little iman. And if we're not careful, this iman that we've spent so much time acquiring through technology that we have today can be rid from ourselves. In the olden days, our elders, when they wanted to communicate with their relatives, they would have to write a letter. And when they would write this letter, they would start, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I pray that this letter finds you. I pray to Allah that this letter finds you in the best of health. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name would be mentioned in that letter many times. That they would pray for the one that they are writing to. Today, of course, with the blessings of technology, it's a quick WhatsApp message or a Facebook post or an Instagram post. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may not even be mentioned or remembered. In the olden days, I remember at my time when my parents would allow me out at night, and they would say, make sure you come home by 9 p.m., that's your curfew. And I would come home later at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. And I know that my mother would say I was staying up praying for your safety, making sure that you come back safely. Now, of course, as parents, we just communicate with WhatsApp, where are you, or a quick phone call to our son or our daughter, please get home, you have passed your curfew time. Sometimes we even forget to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like we used to in the past. Or when we are ill and we are sick today, because medicine has advanced so much. In the olden days, when we are unwell, we would remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala often and frequently to get shafa. Today, sometimes without thinking, we would go into the medicine cabinet, take a few Panadols or ibuprofen, and sometimes even forget to say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim as we consume those pills and take them into our bodies. That if we are not careful, all this ni'mah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have given us, that has come through technology and medicine and science, these are blessings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if we are not careful and we rely on them without remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that it can weaken, it can lessen our patience, and in return weaken our iman. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about 3 types of people on the day of judgment that have that have come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and lost all their faith because of lack of patience. He said, on the day of judgment, a man will be brought in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who had gone through trials and tribulations and been tested in this world, and lost all his faith. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask him, what happened to all of your iman? What happened to all of your sabr that you have lost it all? And the man will say to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, oh Allah, you gave me so many trials and tribulations in this world that I lost all my iman and my patience. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say to his angels, bring forth Nabi Ayyub. And he will say to the man, were your trials and tribulations greater than that of Nabi Ayyub? And the man will say, no. Then why did you lose all of your iman due to lack of patience and sabr? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says on the day of judgment also, a beautiful woman will be brought forth who lost all her iman due to lack of patience. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will question her and say, what happened to all of your iman? And she will reply, oh Allah, you made me so beautiful that I found acts of obedience to you very difficult. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will call the blessed baby Maryam. And he will say to her, are you more beautiful than the blessed baby Maryam? And she will say, no, I'm not. And he will say, well, the blessed baby Maryam never lost any of our iman due to lack of patience. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will then bring forth a handsome man on the day of judgment who lost all his iman due to lack of patience. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask him, what happened? Why did you lose all of your iman? He said, oh Allah, you made me so handsome and so beautiful that I was tempted by sin and disobedience in the world. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask Nabi Yusuf to come forward. And he will ask him, are you so handsome and beautiful as Nabi Yusuf? And the man will say, no, yet Nabi Yusuf showed great restraint in the face of temptation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this example is telling us that patience is the key to safeguarding our iman. That when we are faced with trials and tribulations, when we are faced with temptation of disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we are faced with difficulty in obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah is telling us it is patience that will help us. It is patience that will safeguard our iman and protect that iman within our inner hearts, so it gives us success in this world and the hereafter. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the glorious Quran, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu sabiru wa sabiru wa rabitu wattaqullaha la'allakum tuflihun. O you who believe, persevere in patience. No. Excel in patience. No. Be steadfast and fear Allah. Why? لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ. So that you may be successful. And if we reflect on this, then we will see that this is exactly the patience that the companions and the family of our beloved Prophet had to show in Karbala. On the eve of Ashura, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam gathered all his family together in his tent. He said, tomorrow the battle will begin. No matter what happens to you people, this enemy will not spare me. So, take the cover of darkness tonight and escape from this place. But Imam found that all his companions remained there. And then in the narration it tells us that Imam switched off the lights in his tents. And he said to them that maybe some of you are shy when others are watching. I have switched off the lights in the tent. Now you may be able to leave my company, for I release you of the pledge of allegiance that you have given me. But when Imam Hussein alayhi salam switched on the lights, he found that all his companions were there. For Karbala was a test of patience, a test of iman, a test that no other human being had faced before them. We got to understand the quality of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam's companions in Karbala. Historians tell us and Imams tell us that the companions that Imam al-Hussein had in Karbala were better than the companions of even the Holy Prophet or our first Holy Imam. They asked him why. They said because when the companions of the Prophet went into battle, or the companions of Amir al-Mu'mineen went into the battle, they went in willingly with courage and patience and bravery. But none of them knew that they would become shaheed in that battle. But the companions of Aba Abdullah Hussein alayhi salam, his family members that were there and present in Karbala, they knew the outcome on the day of Ashura. This is how great companions that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam had in Karbala. The patience, imagine the patience that they showed. The patience of Muslim Ibn Aqil on the journey towards Kufa. When he tried to help Imam al-Hussein, imagine the patience that he showed. Or the patience of Zuhair ibn Kayn, or Muslim ibn Awsajar, or Habib ibn Mazahir. For Karbala, everywhere you looked in Karbala, you could see patience, the pinnacle of patience. The patience of Sayyid al-Sa'dareen, Imam Sajjad, when he had to witness the bodies of all the loved ones in Karbala. Or the patience of Bibi Zainab, the patience that she had to show after the tragedy of Karbala took place. In Karbala, on Tilla Zainabiyah, there is a statement that says, Assalamu alayki ya Jabal Asar. Salams upon you, or mountain of patience. But the patience that was the greatest was that of Aba Abdullah Hussein alayhi salam. We often think, how much patience did Imam alayhi salam have to show in Karbala? Because before his very own eyes, his companions had to be sacrificed. He had to witness his companions be sacrificed one by one. Then he had to witness his family members be sacrificed one by one whilst he remained alive. But more than this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala required the sacrifice of his 6-month-old infant Ali al-Asghar. His 6-month-old infant's sacrifice was required before his sacrifice was required. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the glorious Quran, وَإِذَا الْمَوْءُودَةُ سُئِلَتْ بِأَيِّ ذَنْبٍ قُتِلَتْ. And the young infant will ask on the day of judgment, for what sin was I killed? Historians say that on the eve of Ashura, all the mothers were spending their last moments with their sons, preparing them for battle the next day. But there was one mother crying, for she thought that she had no sacrifice to give on the day of Ashura. She would tell Imam al-Hussein, all the other mothers are proudly spending time and preparing their sons for battle, but I have no sacrifice to give on the day of Ashura. Imam Hussein would remain silent. Just before Asr time, on the day of Ashura, historians say, now Imam Hussein thought he was all alone. He cried out, Hal min nasirin yansuruna. Is there anyone to help me? He had thought everyone now had become shaheed. But historians write that all of a sudden, we heard from the tent of the ladies the crying sounds of an infant child. Imam al-Hussein, as if all of a sudden remembered that there was one more sacrifice to give. He entered the tents of the ladies. Rubab, his beloved wife, said to him, "O Imam, when you cried for help, Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli صل على محمد وآل محمد.
صلوات الله محمد وعلى محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Rubab says to our beloved husband Imam al-Hussein, he said, "Oh my beloved husband, when you cried for Hal min Nasirin Yansuruna, your infant son Ali Askar woke up. He came out and he fell out of his cradle. Oh Imam, it has been 3 days since I've been able to give him any water. My milk also has dried up, oh Imam. Before you go to the battle for the last time, oh Imam, before you go to the battle for the last time, go to the enemy soldiers and ask them for water. How could they refuse this infant child water?" Imam Hussein alayhi salam went to his infant Ali Askar. He went to his infant Ali Askar and whispered something into the ear of Ali Askar. Immediately Ali Askar stopped crying. Rubab said, "Oh my beloved husband, have you promised him water? Have you promised him water? Is that why he has stopped crying?" Imam remained silent. He wrapped Ali Askar in a white cloth. He took Ali Askar out of the tents. As he emerged from the tent, historians write, we saw Imam holding something in his hands covered in white. We thought maybe it was a peace offering. He came before the enemy soldiers. He came before the enemy soldiers. He unraveled what was in his hands. We saw that he was holding a young infant child. And then Imam held the infant child in his hands. And he said to them, "Your enmity is with me. You have already killed my companions. You have already killed my sons, my nephew and my brother. But what enmity do you have with my young infant Ali Askar? It has been 3 days since he has tasted water. Spare this young child water." But the enemy were silent. They began to drop their heads, but nobody came forward to give Imam's young infant water. So then Imam said to them, "Maybe you think that if you bring water that I would drink that water. So I will lay my young infant child on the burning sands of Karbala. Maybe one of you will find the kindness in their heart to give water to this young infant child." Imam Hussein placed Ali and Askar on the ground on the burning sands of Karbala, but still no soldier came forward. And then Imam Hussein, he tried one more time. He said, "Oh my beloved son Ali and Askar, show them how thirsty you are." Ali and Askar, the young child, took out his dried tongue from his dried lips. But the enemy soldiers were silent. They began to lower their heads. At this point, Umar ibn Saad cried out, "Iqtal qalam al-Hussein! Kill the words of Hussein!" He asked for his expert archer to come forward. And then the expert archer, he took out a three-pronged arrow. That was used to pierce the necks of camels. He took out this three-pronged arrow which is used to pierce the necks of camels. Umar ibn Saad said, "Kill the words of Hussein." Historians say we don't know who this arrow was aimed towards. Was it aimed towards Imam Hussein or the young infant child? As the arrow was aimed, the archer, all of a sudden from the corner of his eyes, he looked towards the tent of the ladies and he saw the mother of the child watching. As he tried to shoot the arrow fell to the ground. Umar ibn Saad said to him, "Oh Hurmala, why is it that you could not fire the arrow?" Hurmala says, "Oh Imam, how could I fire while the mother of this infant child is watching?" Umar ibn Saad says, "Oh Hurmala, if you do not fire this arrow, then you shall be beheaded on the plains of Karbala." This time Hurmala, without looking towards the tent of the ladies, he takes aim with his three-pronged arrow. He begins to fire the arrow. Historians say it as if all time had stopped. It was dead silent. The arrow was fired. Everybody was looking to see where the arrow would hit. Imam Hussein threw his arm in front of Ali and Askar. The arrow hit Imam's arm. Blood began to spill everywhere. When Imam looked down, he saw that the arrow had pierced Imam began to weep and cry. All of a sudden, historians say, we saw Imam trying to gather the blood of the young Aliun Asghar. Imam was trying to save the life of his young child. He tried to gather the blood as if he didn't want the blood to go into the heavens or fall onto the ground. But when he looked down, he saw that the arrow had pierced deep into the neck of Aliun Asghar. That Aliun Asghar's soul had already departed from this world. Imam began to weep and cry. What was he to do now? Historians say now we saw Imam Hussein in a state of confusion. We saw him in a state of confusion. They say that this was the hardest part of the day of Ashura for Imam Hussein. When they asked why, they said all day when the Shaheed took place when a Shaheed died on the plains of Karbala, Imam Hussein would bring back the body back to the Khaymega. But now he didn't know what to do with the young body of this young infant child. How was he to take Aliun Asghar back to his mother Rabab? And he said, we saw Imam Hussein walk 7 times, try and go to the camp, and then he would walk back, and then he would walk and then walk back, reciting Inna Lillahi wa Inna Ilayhi Raji'un, Ridan bi Qadai wa Tasliman li Amri. Eventually, Imam arrived in the camp of the tent of Umar Rubab. He's covered in the blood of the young infant child. He said, oh my blessed wife Rubab, remember yesterday night you were crying. You were crying because you thought you had no sacrifice to give on the day of Ashura, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He answered your dua. He indeed has given you a sacrifice because you have the youngest sacrifice on the day of Ashura. Rubab began to cry. If only I had more time with my young infant Aliun Asghar, I would be able to prepare him for this calamity that he was to face. And then Imam Hussein and his blessed wife Rubab, they went outside the tent and they buried Aliun Asghar behind the tent, fearing what the enemy soldier would do to this young infant child. But this is not the worst musibah, my brothers and sisters. This is not the biggest tragedy that Imam Hussein had to face, because historians tell us on the day after Ashura, all the heads of the Shaheed were put on spears, being prepared to be taken from Karbala towards Kufa. Once all the heads were on the spears, Shimon remembered. He asked, I think there is one head that is missing. He asked his soldiers, wasn't there an infant child that was killed on the day of Ashura? I cannot see the head of this infant child. The enemy soldiers remained silent. Shimon took his spear. He went towards the tent of Imam Hussein, looking for the grave of this infant child. He began poking the spear into the ground, looking to find the grave. Eventually he strikes the spear somewhere, and blood comes from the earth, and the body of Aliun Asghar is exhumed from the earth, and the head of Aliun Asghar is also placed on a spear and taken from Karbala to Kufa, and from Kufa to Sham. Ala la'natullahi ala al-qawmi al-zalimin, fasaya'lamu alladhina zalamu yawma al-qalibin yanqalibun. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Brothers and sisters, this is the eve of Ashura. Some have likened it to the night of Laylatul Qadr. With tears in your eyes, make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for your hajat, for your wishes, because on this night, with these tears that you have shed for Imam Hussein, his young infant son Aliun Asghar, for his family, inshallah, all our hajat, our duas will be accepted. We all muhtaj of each other's duas. Let us remember one another on this night. Inshallah. Surah Mubarak al-Fatiha. Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein.